And were you all on the same page when it did surface, or any of you had some, concerns about it?
Well, we've talked about it for a long time. We always said, hey man.
When you hear that Tommy Lee might as well be using Mick Mars's spinal bones as drumsticks, you'd be forgiven for thinking it's just another day in the chaotic world of Mötley Crüe. But this time, the joke has worn thin. At 74, Mick Mars has exposed Mötley Crüe, shattering the facade of backstage brotherhood with a stunning volley of accusations against his former bandmates. Far from being just another rock and roll squabble, Mars's claims hint at a festering conflict that's been quietly eroding the group's legacy from within. This is one rock and roll story you can't miss. Let's get started. The rise of Mick Mars. Born as Robert Allen Deal on May 4, 1951, in Terre Haute, Indiana, Mick Mars would later become the sonic anchor of one of the most notorious heavy metal bands of the 1980s. But long before the leather pants, stadium tours, and platinum records, Mars's world was colored by poverty and transience. His family moved from Indiana to Huntington, then eventually settled in Garden Grove, California, a modest, working-class suburb in Orange County. It was there, surrounded by the grit of struggling neighborhoods and the raw pulse of late 60s garage rock, that young Robert developed a passion for music that would shape his entire existence. His parents weren't musicians, but they encouraged his fascination, allowing him to immerse himself in the music of Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Beck, and Eric Clapton. These men would leave a permanent imprint on his playing style. By the time he was a teenager, Robert was not just practicing guitar, but living through it. In high school, he dropped out to focus entirely on music, drifting between local bands in Southern California under various stage names. He spent years playing in outfits with names like Whitehorse and Vendetta, bands that never gained traction beyond dingy clubs and backyard gigs. From 1970 to 1980, Mick was part of at least 7 different bands that came and went without so much as a demo tape to remember them by. However, in 1980, after one final musical project dissolved, Deal took the most important gamble of his life. He changed his stage name to Mick Mars, dyed his hair jet black, and placed a classified ad in the Recycler newspaper. Loud, rude, aggressive guitarist available. That single ad would change everything. Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee, who had recently formed a new band and were looking for a guitarist, answered the ad. The moment they heard Mick play, they knew they'd found something different. Mars was older than them by nearly a decade, but he played like a man who had nothing left to lose. Together with Sixx, Lee, and singer Vince Neil, who joined shortly after, Mötley Crüe was officially born in January 1981 in Los Angeles. They self-released their debut album Too Fast for Love later that year on their own label, Leathur Records, recorded at Hit City West Studios in LA. The raw, unpolished energy of the record, combined with the band's outrageous image, caught the attention of Elektra Records, who signed them in 1982. From there, their rise was meteoric. Shout at the Devil, Theater of Pain, Girls, 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 and Dr. Feelgood would go on to sell millions of copies. Through it all, Mick Mars was the silent, unshakable presence. He was the one member who didn't overdose, punch a paparazzo, or check into rehab every other year. He was the band's musical backbone, anchoring their wild antics with grounded, gritty guitar work. And yet, Mars remained out of the spotlight, often overlooked, and increasingly pushed aside as the band's internal politics evolved. Mars's unique role in Mötley Crüe. While the public image of Mötley Crüe was built on debauchery, excess, and outlandish antics, Mick Mars was the one who not only gave Mötley Crüe its unmistakable sound, but also, quite literally, gave it its name. After joining the group in 1981, he looked at the wild, disparate energy of his new bandmates and sarcastically remarked that they were a motley-looking crew. The phrase stuck. Mars, ever meticulous, took it further by suggesting the use of the umlauts over the O and U, inspired by German bands like Motorhead, to give the name an edgier European metal flavor. That name, Mötley Crüe, would come to symbolize a generation of rebellious rockers. While the other three crew members fed into the 1980s Sunset Strip glam metal machine, layering on the makeup, teasing their hair to absurd heights, and chasing headlines, Mars remained fixated on tone, feel, and structure. His influences came not from trends but from deeply rooted blues and early hard rock. Eric Clapton, Peter Green, Johnny Winter, and Jimi Hendrix shaped his playing. He wasn't trying to impress MTV or match the rising tide of synth-heavy hair metal. Instead, he was focused on making the guitar speak with raw emotion and gritty texture. Listen to Dr. Feelgood, and it's Mars's slithering, down-tuned riff that anchors the song's swagger. The main lick, which he built on a Dorian mode progression, added menace and groove in equal measure. Bob Rock, who produced Dr. Feelgood at Little Mountain Sound Studios in Vancouver, recalled that Mars was often the only member present for the entire session, working alongside engineers to fine-tune tones and track layers with military precision. Another defining moment of his contribution came with "Kickstart My Heart," also off the Dr. Feelgood album. Nikki Sixx wrote the lyrics about being revived from a heroin overdose in 1987 with an adrenaline shot, but it was Mars's guitar work that gave the track its ferocious energy. The opening riff, fast, squealing, and razor-tight, instantly grabs the listener. What many don't know is that Mars used a talk box to modulate the guitar's scream in the intro, paying subtle homage to Joe Walsh and Peter Frampton, while still making it his own. In the studio, he tracked the song's multiple layers using a customized Fender Stratocaster routed through a mix of Marshall, Soldano, and Rivera amps, carefully mic'd and adjusted to capture the searing high end while keeping the rhythm guitar grounded and thick. This technical precision didn't happen by chance. Mars was known for taking exhaustive notes during sessions, often filling notebooks with alternative fingering techniques, amp settings, and phrasing variations. Unlike his bandmates, who were frequently late to sessions or too strung out to record, Mars had a reputation as the first to arrive, last to leave. Producer Tom Werman, who worked on Shout at the Devil and Theater of Pain, credited Mars with keeping the sessions from spiraling out of control. Mick was the only one who acted like a musician in the studio, Werman said in a 2014 interview. He wasn't there to party. He was there to work. His guitar solos, though not as flashy as Eddie Van Halen's or George Lynch's, had a sense of discipline and melodic structure that made them memorable. He didn't shred to show off. He played what served the song, often recording multiple takes late into the night to perfect a single bar. More than just a guitarist, Mars also served as a kind of emotional ballast for the band. While Sixx was orchestrating media spectacles and Neil was navigating legal troubles, from the tragic 1984 vehicular manslaughter case in Redondo Beach to repeated DUI arrests, Mars remained in the shadows, largely avoiding the chaos. His quiet disposition and focus on the craft gave the band a sense of musical integrity it might have otherwise lacked. Even during the band's tumultuous reunions, like their 2004 Red, White, and Crüe tour or the farewell run in 2015, Mars was often the stabilizing presence, showing up for rehearsals, staying out of the drama, and insisting on tight live arrangements. Mick Mars didn't crave the spotlight, nor did he indulge in the notoriety that came with being in Mötley Crüe. But behind the scenes, it was his riffs, his tone, and his work ethic that defined the band's musical identity. Mötley Crüe might have been known for its chaos, but Mick Mars was the calm in the center. There were additional complications, too. Living with ankylosing spondylitis. Living with ankylosing spondylitis is difficult enough for most people to manage in private, but for Mick Mars, it was a battle waged on stage, in studios, and under the unforgiving glare of the public eye. Diagnosed at just 17 years old, long before he had even joined Mötley Crüe, Mars's journey with this degenerative spinal condition began in Terre Haute, Indiana. Ankylosing spondylitis is a chronic inflammatory disease that primarily affects the spine and sacroiliac joints and causes vertebrae to slowly fuse together, leading to severe stiffness, pain, and, in advanced cases, a hunched forward posture. By the time he joined Mötley Crüe in 1981, ankylosing spondylitis had already begun taking its toll, but Mars refused to let it define him. While his bandmates were known for chaotic on-stage antics, Mars's performance style was more stationary, not by choice, but by necessity. As his spine fused, his ability to move became increasingly restricted. By the late 1990s, he was visibly stooped, and the pain had become a permanent part of his daily life. Still, he never missed a studio album, never passed on a tour, and never let the disease be used as an excuse. During the recording of Dr. Feelgood, while other members battled personal demons and harmful substance addiction, Mars was quietly shouldering the additional burden of his illness while still laying down razor-sharp guitar tracks. Bob Rock, who produced the album, described him as the steadiest guy in the band, not just in behavior, but also in technical delivery. Mars often recorded all of his guitar parts without assistants or stand-ins, preferring to do multiple takes himself, even if it meant standing for hours in agony. His medical struggles reached a critical point in 2004 when he underwent a spinal fusion surgery in Los Angeles. This grueling procedure, designed to reduce pain and halt further curvature of the spine, involved removing damaged vertebrae and fusing sections of his spine together with titanium rods and screws. It was a high-risk surgery, and Mars disappeared from the public eye for much of that year to recover. Despite limited mobility and ongoing pain, he returned to work with the band soon afterward, contributing to Red, White, and Crüe, a compilation album that also featured 3 new tracks. Many close to the band, including drummer Tommy Lee and bassist Nikki Sixx, privately admitted they were stunned by his resilience. Despite the increasing curvature of his spine and reliance on custom back braces, Mars kept touring with the band until their so-called final tour in 2015. At times, crew members had to physically help him onto the stage or assist him in reaching his hotel room after shows. Yet, on stage, he never missed a beat. His signature tone remained consistent, even when his physical body was deteriorating. In 2008, he was honored in Guitar World magazine's 100 Greatest Metal Guitarists of All Time list. What perhaps sets Mars apart most starkly in the annals of rock history is that he achieved legendary status without the usual bravado. He didn't spin his suffering into a gimmick or play up the tortured artist narrative. Instead, he quietly fought a disease that should have ended his career in his 20s and still managed to outlast the average lifespan of a rock band by decades. But it was not all good. Departure, replacement, and a legal battle. On October 26, 2022, Mick Mars took to Variety to publicly announce his retirement from touring with Mötley Crüe. At 71, he cited decades of painful struggle with ankylosing spondylitis. He also clarified that he was merely stepping away from the demands of the road, not from the band itself. Just one day later, on October 27th, Crüe released their own announcement via social media and press outlets such as Metal Castle and Ultimate Classic Rock, confirming that John Five, longtime guitarist for Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson, would step in as the touring guitarist. However, what followed in the press release raised eyebrows. It made no mention of Mars's retained position, profit share, or creative stake. Tour promotional materials and posters for the 2023 stadium tour, set to run alongside Def Leppard across Latin America, Europe, and North America, omitted Mick Mars entirely, featuring only John 5 as the band's guitarist. To fans and media alike, this omission felt abrupt and unsettling. Mars was blindsided by the rapid transition. The guitarist had emphasized that while he could no longer tour, he would continue as a member of the band, signaling his intent to remain involved in recordings, business decisions, and royalties. Instead, the Crüe's nearly immediate repositioning of John 5 as a permanent touring figure and use of the band's corporate apparatus to reassign roles left Mars feeling marginalized. The narrative took another turn when April 6, 2020 saw Mick Mars file a lawsuit in Los Angeles County Superior Court. According to legal filings and reports from Entertainment Weekly and Vanity Fair, Mars alleged that Nikki Sixx, Tommy Lee, and Vince Neil orchestrated an emergency shareholders meeting to strip him of his shares and directorship, cutting his profit stake from 25% to 5%, and redirecting touring, merchandise, and legacy earnings to exclude him entirely. He claimed the band's public portrayal of his departure as a retirement was misleading. In response, the band's attorney, Sasha Fried, asserted that Mars effectively resigned by choosing to retire from touring, citing a 2008 agreement that ceased a member's entitlement to touring-related compensation upon voluntary exit. Meanwhile, bassist Nikki Sixx took to social media, expressing sorrow but standing by the decision. "Sad day for us, and we don't deserve this considering how many years we've been propping him up. We still wish him the best." Amid the legal crossfire, a telling moment emerged when John 5 shared that Mars was among the first to text him after the replacement was made official. He said, "You're going to kill it. It's good. It's not like some stranger coming in," John 5 recalled in a March 2023 interview. What unfolded over the winter of 2022 to 2023 was a textbook example of rock band politics colliding with legal and branding machinery. For Mars, a founding member since January 1981, the announcement was a seismic shift, not just announcing the end of his touring days, but effectively outrunning his legacy on the band's marquee. Mars filed a lawsuit in April 2023, accusing Sixx, Lee, and Neil of orchestrating a forced exit from decision-making structures, citing legal documents for companies like Mötley Crüe Incorporated, Mötley Records LLC, and Crüefest LLC. The lawsuit also charged Nikki Sixx with gaslighting Mars, alleging that Sixx criticized Mars's on-stage performance, claiming he forgot chords or was mentally unfit, even as other members were reportedly miming during shows. Mars insisted he was the only member performing 100% live during the 2022 stadium tour, citing faulty in-ear monitors and technical issues as explanations for any mistakes. A letter from Mars's attorney confirmed the arbitration process began in February 2023, suggesting the others sought legal shelter to avoid public scrutiny. The post-announcement period saw significant shifts in public posture by bandmates that inflamed the situation. Nikki Sixx took to Twitter in April 2023, expressing his sorrow. "Sad day for us, and we don't deserve this. We love you, Mick," but also claimed Mars was misled by representatives. His comments further emphasized the band's decision as a matter of continuity, not conflict. Central to Mars's suit is an assertion that he held a 25% stake in the Mötley Crüe enterprise, an interest that, during an emergency shareholders meeting shortly after his touring announcement, was slashed to a mere 5%, without his knowledge or signature. He insisted he remained legally and morally entitled to his original share, claiming that the remaining members effectively orchestrated a takeover of the brand. Mars's complaint emphasized that trademarks for Mötley Crüe and associated merchandising rights were jointly owned, and that using the band's name without his approval violated fiduciary duties born from decades of joint stewardship. His legal team even prepared motions to seek an injunction preventing the band from performing or releasing materials under the name until a formal agreement was reached. The legal battle entered public view in earnest in January 2024, when Los Angeles Superior Court Judge James C. Chalfant issued a partial ruling. He found that Mars had the right to inspect internal financial documents and operating agreements, materials the band had withheld for 8 months prior. Judge Chalfant ruled that the requests were not burdensome and that Mötley Crüe's delay was improper, entitling Mars to seek reimbursement for his legal expenses. Although the judge declared that aspect of the case moot following document production, the crux of the dispute, whether Mars was lawfully removed and stripped of rights, was set to be resolved via private arbitration later in the year. But the consequences of the suit have reverberated beyond the courtroom. Within months, the media spotlight turned into a searchlight. Coverage revealed that major sponsors, arenas, and tour promoters, including Live Nation, had begun scrutinizing the legal entanglements before committing to future Crüe ventures. Industry analysts began predicting that the band's brand image, long built on the myth of unbreakable brotherhood, was increasingly stretched. As commentators across Variety, Billboard, and Rolling Stone noted, a rock band once celebrated for its unity was now fractured in public view. On the legal front, Mars's attorney Ed McPherson declared the January ruling a win for justice, stating, "Somebody finally said no to their bullying." He noted the arbitration would determine whether Mars would reclaim his full ownership or remain sidelined. But on a positive note, Mick Mars launched his long-awaited solo career with the release of his debut album, The Other Side of Mars, on February 23, 2024. This was the perfect artistic response to his departure from Mötley Crüe and the turmoil that followed. Recorded in Nashville with veteran producer Michael Wagoner and a stellar lineup including keyboardist Paul Taylor, drummer Ray Luzier, and vocalist Jacob Bunton, the album departed from glam metal nostalgia to embrace a darker, grunge-infused hard rock sound laced with industrial and alternative influences. Its lead single, Loyal to the Lie, released on Halloween 2023, was seen by many as a veiled retort to Mötley Crüe's internal drama, with other tracks like Killing Breed and Right Side of Wrong reinforcing themes of betrayal, resilience, and self-assertion. Critics praised its emotional weight and Mars's raw guitar tone, while fans drove it to number 5 on iTunes Rock and number 18 on Billboard's Top Rock Albums. Despite his ongoing battle with ankylosing spondylitis, Mars chose not to tour, instead focusing on remix releases, a behind-the-scenes documentary, and a follow-up album due in late 2025. Through interviews in 2024 and 2025, including a Rolling Stone cover story, Mars shared his quiet heartbreak over how things ended with Crüe, but emphasized growth, independence, and his love for the studio over the stage. Now viewed as a dignified elder statesman in rock, his influence continues to shape younger artists, and his 75th birthday in 2026 is already anticipated as a major cultural milestone. The Other Side of Mars is a bold redefinition of his legacy as an artist unwilling to fade on anyone's terms but his own. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.